Do the St. Louis Blues have enough star power heading in to the 25-26 season?
Hey, this is Brayden Chen. Subscribe to Lock On Blues.
You're Locked On Blues, your daily podcast on the St. Louis Blues. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to Locked On Blues. I am your host of Locked On Blues, Haley Taylor Simon, talking to you all things about our St. Louis Blues here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today on Locked On Blues, I'm going to talk to you about if I believe the Blues have enough star power heading into this upcoming season. I also want to talk about if Dvorsky will make the team out of camp. And then finally, a review from camp today. We have a lot to talk about today here on Locked On Blues. Again, your first listen every day. And I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So I'm going to be very transparent with you all. I just had to drink an energy drink, which I don't do often. But I just completed 2 national shows for the Locked On Podcast Network talking about the Blues. So as I've been sitting here, the sun's gone down. I'm feeling a little bit delusional, if I'm going to be honest with you, right? I knew this was going to be a marathon of a day. And one of the big talking points was about, the off season. And it got me thinking. While the Blues may not have required a star player this offseason, they have a star player on their team already, and it's Robert Thomas. And I could go on and on about Robert Thomas. I think he is one of the most underrated players, and I appreciate that Robert Thomas has gotten some more recognition nationally. I think that the national media is actually doing a pretty good job showing more interest in my favorite hockey player, Robert Thomas. But at the same time, I still believe he doesn't get enough. Now, the Daily Faceoff did a whole entire series where they sat down with Robert Thomas and they talked with him. And I'm like, thank you, finally showcasing my guy, Robert Thomas. Okay. You can tell I'm a big Robert Thomas fan. However, at the end of the day, I think that when you have a player like him, a player like a Jordan Kyrou, a player like a Jordan Bennington, a player like a Dylan Holloway, a player like a Colton Parayko, and so many more guys that have something so special about them on ice. Yeah, they have enough star talent. Maybe none of their names are the same level as a Connor McDavid. And at the end of the day, okay. It is what it is. Like, I look at Robert Thomas, for instance, in last season, he only played the 70 games because of the injury, but he had 21 goals and 60 assists, accumulating 81 points. So how can you tell me that's a player that's not good, right? Jordan Kyrou had 70 points, and the list goes on and on. My main point, though, is that do you really need, in this day and age in the NHL, to have a team surrounded by a player with such a big name? Like, for instance, the Nashville Predators. Okay, you signed Steven Stamkos to a ridiculous amount of money. How did that pan out for them last season? I can tell you, not good. So it just makes me kind of question, in a sense, of what even is a star player. Is the star player a guy that gets the most recognition or a player that plays the best? And looking at the Utah Mammoth, right? A team that I think is going to be a lot better than last season. A little bit concerned about them, but you have Clayton Keller, hometown guy, by the way. We love Clayton Keller. But again, when we play against him, we're not. No, no, no. 90-point season. You could say that he is a star player, but the national media does a thing where they don't focus on teams necessarily in smaller markets. They don't. And if you put a Robert Thomas on a team like the Rangers or the Maple Leafs, oh my goodness, could you imagine all of the attention that he would get? However, he's here in St. Louis where he deserves to be because, again, he won a cup here. Don't forget that. And, well, Toronto, where's that cup at? But that was shade. But the point is that I feel like sometimes teams that have that star player have a lot of unrealistic expectations. Like a Connor Bedard, he is what? He's turning 20 or just turned 20. Okay, the Blackhawks are still not going to be a good team. And you saw last season, the fans were turning on Connor Bedard. And then, of course, McDavid, everyone's like, oh, is he going to resign with Edmonton? What's going to happen with him in Edmonton? It just, Austin Matthews and the Leafs. Like, you get what I'm saying? It just seems to me, in my opinion, that the teams that are actually sometimes the most successful don't necessarily need a star player. I look at the Florida Panthers, and that team was conducted and constructed with a lot of players that were really good. Now, you could make the argument and say that Matthew Tkachuk was their star player, and I would agree. I think Matty Tkachuk turns it on during the playoffs. But you could also look in and say Bobrovsky. I mean, there's so much talent on that team. However, I feel like they didn't have like that one player that took the attention of being the star player. And it's interesting, right? Like even the whole goalie situation. Back in the day, you would have one goalie and you would rock and roll with him. And if he gets injured, that's when the backup comes in. Now you're seeing a lot of teams having a goalie tandem. Like for the Blues, while Binnington is your starting goalie and your main guy, you also have a Joel Hofer that plays a handful of games. So it is an interesting dynamic how the game has changed. And I think the whole idea of having a star player is also maybe becoming old school in a sense. I do. I think that the teams that are most successful don't necessarily need to rely on that. And it just got me so, I don't want to say passionate, but it did, about maybe the disrespect nationally that I have been dealing with for years now, being a Blues fan. So basically, my whole life. Um, you see, I think that there's some players that deserve recognition, and it's not even just with the Blues. There's other players and other teams, but this is my podcast. I'm a Blues fan. So I personally think that when the national media took their time and focused on Jordan Bennington's emotional outbursts back in the day, he only had, I think, like one this season, so it was fine. Um, they didn't necessarily focus on the fact that he came in as a rookie and helped big time take this team to the cup. And I will never understand that. Why is it that the national media will praise players like an Austin Matthews, a McDavid, but yet they don't do the same for players that deserve it? I mean, Jordan Binnington was your starting goalie for the Four Nations faceoff. And on top of that, he's most likely going to be the starting goalie for Team Canada in the Olympics in February. So maybe I am biased myself. I mean, I'm definitely biased. Like, who am I kidding? But it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense why the national media was having a field day ripping Jordan Cairo after the comments that he made about Berube. But yet, he had a 70-point season and you hear absolutely nothing. Again, make it make sense. You know what? Also make this make sense. When there was all those rumors about Torrey Krug potentially being traded and he didn't, want to waive his no trade clause, they were like, oh, well, he just doesn't want to play on the Flyers because they're a bad team. No, Torrey Krug deserves to not waive his no trade clause. Like, the national media, for whatever reason, just likes to paint maybe the Blues in a bad light. And now I'm happy that Robert Thomas is at least getting recognition nationally. But I can't do this for another season where they pick one player that they think should be traded. It was Braden Shen last year. It was Jordan Kyer, Torrey Krug. Let these guys play the damn game of hockey. Let them play hockey. This is a playoff team. They made it to the playoffs last season and almost upset the President Trophy winning Winnipeg Jets. Also, oh, by the way, did I mention that Connor Hellebuck had to be pulled in all 3 games in St. Louis? So again, ask me how I feel about the national media. Ask me how I feel about the disrespect, and I'm not happy about it. I don't tolerate it. So, doing those shows today just really got me amped up. However, it had to be said. You know what else has to be said, though? I have a lot of friends, right? And one of my friends that I can always rely on and make money from is FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because I love my same game parlays. That is my it thing, right? We all have our it thing. Mine is building a same game parlay, SGP for life. And I think you should take out your phones and you should place a bet. You should do Jalen Hurts anytime touchdown and say Sean Barkley over on rushing yards. So I personally think at the end of the day, that is going to win you some money. And I'm completely cool with that because I am happy that you get to experience the luxury of FanDuel too. So you're ready to play? Down the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. So one of the big questions that we have heading into the season is, do we think that Dalibor Dvorsky is going to make the team? And this is something that I've gone back and forth with. I don't know if I think he's going to make the team. I don't. It's funny. Well, not funny, but I was looking at some of the projected lineups, right? I think we have our first and fourth line figured out, as I mentioned in yesterday's episode, which you should check out. However, the question then becomes, where does Dvorsky fit? And I just don't think he's going to make the team off the bat. Now, I think that he had a great season with the Thunderbirds, and I highlighted all that he accomplished. So, again, I'm telling you to check out yesterday's episode, but I think that cuts are going to be made. And I don't want him or you or anybody to worry if he has to spend more time in the AHL. The AHL is a developmental league for the NHL. And I think that we get it a little bit mixed up sometimes as, oh, well, he's not good enough. Well, okay, he's still young. I believe he's only like 20. So he still has a lot of time to grow and to improve. But I also think it's vital for him to spend most of training camp here. I think that he is going to benefit a lot from learning from Montgomery. And not only that, just playing at a higher level in terms of practicing in these scrimmages and preseason games. So I think that sometimes we have to set realistic goals. I think realistically, we can look and we can say, I think Snuggy's going to make the camp. Heck, Snuggy might even be on the first or second line, depending on how things go, which is a huge accomplishment. But he proved that last year with how he played in those 7 regular season games. And then, of course, in the series against Winnipeg. Don't forget, in game 2, Jimmy Snuggard was the only player on the Blues to score a goal, which is so insane to think about. But it's the truth. And I encourage you to be more open minded about maybe some of your players that you like that you think should be on the opening night roster on the T Birds instead. I challenge you to look at it with this mindset. Would you rather a player be rushed and put on the opening night roster, or would you rather them develop to their full potential? There are some NHL teams that suck at developing players, right? They draft well. The guy looks like he's going to be, a star one day. And then the next thing you know, well, you don't see him again and he's a bust. That happens on a lot of teams. But for the Blues, luckily, we have a really good track record of developing players. And I think too, like a lot of people tend to forget that Jordan Kyrou was on the Thunderbirds, right? That's why he didn't win the cup, because he's at the T-Birds. So I think that again, it's not an insult to play in the AHL. In the AHL, it's such a different game. It's fast, it's physical, it's competitive. I mean, to try to get the Calder Cup, it's not easy whatsoever. So I think at the end of the day, you're going to see Dvorsky wearing the blue note as the season goes on. And I want to just remind you of something that Doug Armstrong said prior to training camp. He stated, just because you may not make the team opening night doesn't mean you won't be on the team as the season goes on. And I want you to think about that. How many players do you see get caught up as the season goes on, not just with the Blues, but other NHL teams? A good amount. That happens a lot. And you still have to take on training camp like you're fighting for a roster spot so you can know what you need to improve on in the developmental league, which is the AHL. And that is the biggest takeaway. Dvorsky played only 2 games with the Blues and no points, right? And, I could go on and on about his season last year in the AHL. I mean, he was an all-star for crying out loud, representing the T-Birds. So he obviously is a very skilled and talented player, but sometimes that jump, right? OHL, AHL, and then you go to the NHL. Sometimes that's a little bit too big of a jump, especially with a team, by the way, that was pushing for the playoffs. The Blues were in the midst of their fight to get into the playoffs. And then you put up a guy that has no NHL experience. And sure, maybe he didn't do what everybody thought he was going to do in terms of, scoring and setting up plays. However, it's not like he was awful on ice. Points don't always determine how a player is. Points help you with that, right? It adds more credibility to your game when you're able to say, oh, well, this player had a 70-point season, an 80-point season. But at the end of the day, I see players all the time that may not have the highest amount of points, but did a pretty good job, like a Cam Fowler. I mean, he had a good amount of points, but you get what I'm saying? And I think that for a player like Dvorsky, he's going to probably be at camp up until he can't be. There might be conflicting dates when the Thunderbirds camp begins. And also, too, there is always the chance that he makes the team. And I just want to say that. But I don't think he's going to be. After doing some thinking and after just kind of planning out how this roster is going to look, I just don't see him fitting in yet. If there is 2 or 1 more roster spot available, absolutely. But there's not. And that's the issue. This is a competitive fight internally. This is not an easy camp, and this is not going to be an easy team to make. If anything, it's a challenge. And that is why, if you do make the opening night roster, a veteran, a rookie, whoever it is, it's an honor because this is going to be one of the hardest Blues teams to make in recent times. And I truly mean that. The amount of young talent that they have on this team is out of this world. And of course, I'm sad to see guys like a Lucas Fisher go, right? Like that sucks. But at the end of the day, you don't want to also hold players at camp when you know that they're A, not going to make the team, and B, can develop and just work on what they need to get going on with their juniors or respective team. And that's why training camp can be such a blessing sometimes. What if you spend 1, 2, 3 days at camp, right? And they think that you're just not skating hard enough. Not that you're not trying hard enough, but your skating isn't just, to par. Well, you know what to work on. And I've spoke to a lot of guys, a lot of players, a lot of prospects that have gotten cut from camp after the first couple of days. And they tell me, hey, this whole last season, this is what I worked on because this is what they told me at camp I needed to work on. And they're so motivated. So I don't think for any of these players that don't make the team, it's a negative on them. It's a positive because now they know what they need to work on. And you don't want to see guys make the team just because you want them to earn a spot. And that's like your opportunity at camp, right? Is to try to earn a spot. But you also can't be unrealistic and expect players to make the team that need a little bit more development, right? Again, the NHL is one of the, not even it is the best league in all of professional sports. And that is why I still think, and I still hold this true to me, that this camp it's hard. It's a battle. And, Monty said it, Armstrong said it, everyone said it. And it's not going to be easy. It's obviously it's not going to be easy. But at the end of the day, it's gonna generate a pretty damn good team. So that's what I will say on that. I also want to talk to you about some of the things that have been going on inside of camp because yeah, sure, we had a little bit of a scare, right? We were a little bit worried about some of the things that happened. And for me, I was really nervous about a potential injury. Um, you know, listen, whenever you hear a player that you really like get hurt, it isn't good, right? And that to me was nerve-wracking. But anyways, the Blues had camp today. However, it was off ice workouts. So we didn't get anything on ice, which is fine. We do have a game coming up on Saturday at home against the Blackhawks, preseason action. But yesterday there was news that Jimmy Snuggerud, collapsed. Well, not collapsed. That's a bad word. Actually, let me rephrase. Slammed into the boards, and it was in the way that Monty described it was like a car accident getting hit from behind. Now, what I will say is this: I was worried. I was panicked. Everything just really flashed before my eyes, and I thought, "Oh my goodness, what's going to happen?" Luckily, it doesn't seem like it's anything that bad. What I have taken away from camp is a couple things. One, Captain Braden Shen and Pius Suter are going to battle it out for the 2C. That's my initial thoughts. I think Suter should play 2C and Captain Braden Shen should play 3C. Your centers will be Robert Thomas, 1C, Pius Suter, 2C, Captain Braden Shen, 3C, and Oscar Sunquest, 4C. I think that we have it locked down and solidified that Thomas 100% will be the 1C and that Oscar Sundquist will be the 4C. However, I think, at least for me, I I'm really optimistic about Bushi playing on the left wing and Neighbors playing on the right wing on that first line, obviously Thomas centering. And the reason why I say that is this: Jake Neighbors is a player that I really like, a player that has a lot of potential. And maybe he didn't have the best, rock star season last year. And again, you can't expect that out of every single player. I really like Jake Neighbors, and I'm a big fan of him. And again, another player that the Blues developed. So again, it just goes to show that they're really good at developing players. But with Jake Neighbors, I just want him to play a solid season. I mean, he had 46 points last season with 22 goals and 24 assists and only 122 shots, which for Neighbors, just for me, seemed a little bit low, right? However, another player that didn't really turn it on was Bushi. And I don't know. It's just not like, oh, I'm nervous, but it just makes me a little bit optimistic about how it's going to be this upcoming season, right? Because you have Robert Thomas with an 81-point season. Again, that is huge. Last year, you had Bushi, 20 goals and 37 assists with 57 points total. Now, what I will say about him is he spends a lot of time on the ice with 19 minutes on the ice per game, but I need to see more of him, right? I need to see more. He had 32 takeaways and 70 giveaways. And he has such a significant role offensively on this team. He does. But I need to see it amplified. I am not worried about Robert Thomas. I think I make that very clear. And I'm not necessarily worried about Jake Neighbors or Pavel Buchnevich. I'm not. However, I just want to see it amped up a little bit more. To make the playoffs, especially being a team in the Central, you're going to need at least 95 points. The Blues had 96 points last season, 44 wins, 30 losses, and 8 OTLs. So you really need to step it up as a whole. What does that entail? I don't know. Because you can say all the great things prior to the season, but I don't know what they need to work on now. I haven't seen enough yet. I haven't assessed enough yet. The preseason games are great, but I mean, let's be honest, in these first couple games, while you do have veterans playing, you have a lot of the younger guys mixed in. So when we get towards the end of the preseason games where we kind of get to see what the team's going to actually look like, maybe then we can make assessments. I know that Monty wasn't so happy with Tyler Tucker, but other than that, I haven't really heard much criticism. So I'm curious about what you think. Are you worried about any of these potential lines, or do you think that right now this looks good to go? Let me know your thoughts. I am curious to hear it. All right, I will talk to you tomorrow. And like always, let's go Blues.